G'day guys, this week I'll be building a couple of photo frames, a couple out of Jarrah and a couple more out of Tasmanian Blackwood. First up I need to mill the material. I'm starting off with 6x1 boards which have already been skip dressed at the mill, and all I need to do is rip them down the guts, flatten them out on the jointer and then thickness them both width and thickness through my thickness planer. I really prefer to dimension the width of the timber through the thicknesser itself rather than using a table saw, because it's just easier. All I have to do is pick it up and shove it through, and it's consistent and it just works really well for me. Now that I've got my material machined up, I can now create the picture frame profile that I'm going to be using, and it's just 3 cuts that I need to make. First up, I need to put a little cove on that front corner, and it's very important that I do this in the correct order. So I have to put a cove in there first, in order to achieve the low angle bevel cut that I put onto the face of these picture frames. I've laid the saw blade over and attached a false fence to my ripping fence, and then I can just push it through. Now, I don't have a great deal of surface area left after the cut, so it's a little bit dicey, but with a bit of patience, with a bit of care, it goes through pretty flawlessly. It's not perfect, but it was pretty good. And finally, I just need to apply a little rebate to the inside back edge of the timbers to accept all of the glass and the MDF panel and the photo and the cardboard that I'm going to use. And because my saw blade's not wide enough, I need to do it in 2 passes. And that's it, that's the profile right there. Those 2 screws that I've screwed into my workbench top, they work really good as a planing stop, because the heads slightly dig into the end of the timber, which stops the timber from lifting up when I'm on the other end of the board, when I apply pressure down to the other end of the board. And as you can see, the saw blade is deflected just that little bit as I was cutting, so the hand plane makes quick work of that. Sure is better than sanding it. Normally when I cut miter joints, I just lay the saw blade over to 45 degrees, and that way I can make fine adjustments just by turning the angle adjustment wheel. But because when my saw blade is laid over at 45 degrees, it only cuts about 55 millimeters high. Now the timbers here are 70 millimeters wide or thereabouts, so it wasn't high enough, so I've had to use this little miter fence, and this miter fence is bloody terrible. It flexes as I cut, so it throws out my angle just that little bit, so I've got to check everything and cut everything and then check everything and cut everything and check everything. Now, I spent hours cutting, 4 sets of miters, which is frustrating to watch it again. Now, because miter joints are very weak structurally, I need to reinforce them somehow. Now, I didn't want to have any exposed joinery in this job except for the face joint of the miter joint. So I'm just using a slot cutter in my router table to create a little biscuit slot. It's pretty accurate, it's pretty safe, pretty easy, pretty quick. I like it. But then I have to go and make little biscuits to suit, because in order to get a structural joint there, I need to make sure that the timber grain runs perpendicular to the joint of the miter joint. So I can't buy them off the shelf, which is annoying, but it doesn't take that long to make a couple of them. So I've always hated having to glue up four corner miter joints now. Even if I've got all of my joints cut absolutely spot on perfect, and during a dry assembly everything goes together just perfectly, as soon as you get glue onto it, things expand a little bit, which doesn't really throw things out that much. But if you misalign any of those joints even slightly, your 45-degree angles become anything but 45 degrees, and so you end up with a gap on the inside of the joint or the outside corner of the joint, even though you cut everything perfectly. So not only do you have to cut everything perfectly, you have to align everything absolutely spot on perfectly under the pressure of the clamps and whatnot. And it's just a difficult task in woodworking, four corner miter joints. Like, I much prefer to cut mortise and tenons, or I don't know, dovetail joints or whatever, rather than a four corner miter joint. I really do hate them. But even with all of my complaining, they came together pretty well. And a quick sand just to prove that I actually did it, and I can apply a few coats of Danish oil. Now in this case I put about 5 coats on there. That's 1 coat per day for the 5 days, and I just put it on there, let it sit there for about 10 minutes, then I buff off the excess oil and let them dry overnight, and then I do it all again the next day for 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 days. So this is just a cheap photo frame that I picked up from the local junk shop. Now it's got everything that I need inside there. It's got the MDF backing piece, it's got the cardboard photo surrounds, it's got the piece of glass in there. So that's all good. Now it works out to be a little bit more expensive doing it this way, but when I'm only making 4 frames, an extra couple of bucks, does it really matter? Like, for the ease and convenience of this, it's a pretty good way to go, I reckon. I love this tool. I don't get to use it very often because it's very job specific, but I forget what it's called as well. I think it's a point driver or something like that, but it's just an awesome little staple gun type thing, and it puts a little flexible point in there. holds everything nice and easy. I actually made a bit of a mistake with the design of this. I didn't even think about how I was going to hang the picture at the end, but those eyelets, I need a little bit more wall thickness on the frame material, so the 20mm thickness that I've used wasn't thick enough, and I've just totally forgotten about it until I got to this stage, and I'm like, oh gosh, I've only just got enough room, sort of, but it ends up, I can't actually hold the pictures flat against the wall. They actually kick forward just that little bit because the back isn't flat anymore. But it is what it is. I'm not unhappy about it. It's just live and learn, eh? Well, thanks very much for sticking around to the end of the video, guys. If you like this video, be sure to click the thumbs up button. If you've got any questions or queries, by all means leave them down below. And that little girl there is the reason for the baby cot, the chest of drawers, the jewellery box, the photo frame that I've been building on this channel over the last 18 months or so. She's a good kid though.